Brennan not being here, I have two bosses. I work for the AFL-CIO on a national solidarity grant, and a lot of the work I do for them is for the Worker Center. So I have two young visionary bosses, two lawyers, one of whom told me to come to this forum and check out what's happening. And the other of whom said, I'm stuck in court, go to the forum yourself. So I'll talk briefly about both jobs and about the intersection, and I'll start with immigration issues. I'd like also to touch on issue one briefly, and also there's a movement to get some legislation around short-term housing that's coming up. But first, with regard to immigration, as you may know, Cincinnati declared itself a sanctuary city in January 2017, and more recently, folks from the Worker Center and the AFL-CIO have been asking politicians locally what that would mean. And essentially, it means almost nothing. Every council member we talk to has pretty much backed away from it, largely because of the jail. The jail is not controlled by the city. The jail is controlled by a countywide elected official. And Sheriff Neal is not interested in a sanctuary policy. Now, the city does maintain and seems to be good with having the local police not ask for immigration information. So to that extent, a motorist stopped in Cincinnati who doesn't have a license apparently should not be asked about his or her immigration status, and generally CPD seems not to do that. We do run into some trouble with CPD when, and this is the reason Brennan is in court, when interpreters aren't called, for instance. So there was an incident involving what we refer to as whistleblowers. These are folks who are engaged in an ongoing labor case with the Worker Center. So some Latino folks were at an apartment complex. There was an altercation. The police came and did not interview the Spanish-speaking folks. Seemed not to have done so. Certainly did not call for interpretation. And the only person arrested in the altercation was a Latino worker who is, as I said, involved in a wage theft case with the Worker Center. So Brennan's position is that, and the Worker Center position is that while the Worker Center and other organizations don't have the manpower to go after every single deportation case or arrest that will then lead to deportation, they do respond quickly to labor cases, to cases in which a supposed firewall between labor enforcement and ICE is broken, which under this current administration is pretty much gone. There was a convention, it's not the law, but there was under Obama a convention whereby ICE would not get involved in any kind of ongoing labor dispute. So here we have a labor dispute. The police were called. The person is now in custody. The person is in custody in the jail, and the jail has a policy of automatically alerting ICE if there is an undocumented person in their jail. In fact, they conduct what are called custodial interviews because the person's in custody and is then called to the phone and spoken to in his or her own language, saying first thing the person says on the phone is, "Hey, I'm from the government. I want to make sure you're okay. Is your family okay? Is your family receiving any aid?" Things like that. And then on the basis of that interview, the ICE is an ICE officer. The ICE officer asks for a holder, and the person then is remanded to the custody of ICE after his or her local legal problem is settled, so that there's no way for these people to be outside on bail because they have an ICE holder. They're not trusted to show up for their court hearing, and once it's resolved, they head off to Butler County. So Jim Neal is not on the ballot. And apparently every single democratically elected official has talked to him about this policy, but he seems not to budge on it, and in fact does not seem to acknowledge that it's happening. The official policy is that ICE gets notified when a national database is searched. If someone's identification is not certain and they have to look to national databases, ICE gets pinged, and then they decide whether they want to respond or not. That seems to be not really the way it works. The way it works, from anecdotal evidence, is that the jail, once they find someone is undocumented, they call ICE, and ICE says, hold that person or has an interview on the phone and issues a hold. So that's one issue we're working on, finding ways to pressure the sheriff before the election, and that's something any citizen can do. If you think that workers here, undocumented workers, are people that we should not persecute and not harass. There are plenty in the county, as Councilmember Young indicated, that are happy that we're harassing undocumented workers. But I suspect in Cincinnati, certainly the majority does not think that undocumented people should be deported en masse, and doesn't consider it a solution to say, well, they should have gotten in line, or they should come through legally. So that's one aspect of what we do. Another is that we have a wage theft ordinance that was written by, largely written by the Worker Center, and that the building trades are trying to enforce. So we're identifying properties where the wage theft ordinance would be enforced. And basically, those are anything after, I think it's March 2016, or I'm not sure of the date, but recent, after the ordinance was passed, if you are a contractor and you steal wages from your workers, you don't pay overtime, you don't pay full wage, then you can have, that the project can have its subsidies taken away, its tax abatement taken away. And there's at least one case in which the city has brought an action. I'll speak briefly about issue one, which is not going to be endorsed, I don't think, by the AFL-CIO. I don't even think, does anyone know if the Democratic Party is endorsing the Cumberland County?
Yeah.
The Democratic Party did.
Yeah.
Okay. I know Cordray is for it. And so there is a strong effort by the Republican establishment and the Republican candidate for governor to suggest that it would be a disaster for the county, for the state, that a constitutional amendment is hard to undo, and that if you, that DeWine's line is that someone arrested with 100 grams of fentanyl would not face any jail time because of the constitutional amendment. And others have pointed out that if you have any significant amount of fentanyl, you're not using that fentanyl, you're selling, because a very tiny amount of fentanyl can kill people, and people with fentanyl would be eligible for any kind of charges that they are currently. So my perspective is altered by the fact that my son died from fentanyl poisoning not too long ago, and that I think we as Democrats and as progressives probably need to be more aware and bolder about harm reduction. I think it's a hot button issue, and that would be one reason the Democratic Party might be, and some candidates might be reluctant to embrace it. But it's pretty clear also that the drug war is, overall a failure. And it was designed to reduce drug use. Well, that's not happening. And it's probably time to think about less punitive measures. And so I encourage you to look at Harm Reduction Ohio. That's an organization that is pushing these policies. And then, whereby, so things like safe injection sites, ways of testing drugs, as Harm Reduction Ohio pointed out, there are people who die because they don't know what they're getting. Their body needs heroin, they think they're buying heroin, and in fact they're buying an adulterated substance, and that kills them. And then finally, I've been in talks just recently, or meetings about Airbnb and other short-term rentals. And in terms of the housing crisis we have already, it's rather alarming that there are efforts to regulate the short-term rental market are running into strong opposition from investors. And so that there was a resident of Over the Rhine who has looked into it quite a bit, and among her, in her very short block, in a very small area around her block where she lives, there are 14 full-time Airbnb rentals that will not be occupied by people who care about the neighborhood. They'll be empty most of the time. They will not be occupied by voters, but certainly will not be occupied by low-income people. And it's a very lucrative market, apparently. So the unions, are The AFL-CIO is generally in favor of policies that will help working people. So, depleting housing stock is not one of those policies. It's also the case that in these Airbnb rentals, they have a way of, the owners have a way of indicating whether they pay a living wage to, if they pay a living wage to workers who clean. And it's just self-reported, there's no checking, and still only 20% of the investors indicate that they do pay a living wage. So some kind of regulation is coming down the pike, and it would be, we believe that it would be useful for ordinary citizens to stand behind that regulation and demand that we not have a city that's just full of weekend tourists and investors who don't live in their Airbnbs and allow the civic fabric of their neighborhoods to